Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first, but certainly not our last webinar of 2022. Seems fishy? It probably is. Debunking 4 myths that put your customers at risk. A couple of housekeeping topics before we get started. On the agenda today, we'll give an overview of who Cofense is. We're going to jump into debunking 4 of the 4 common phishing myths that we come across often. And at the end of the session, we'll have some open Q&A time. But you can also ask questions at any time throughout the session using the Q&A window in your console. This webcast will be recorded, and everyone here today will receive a link to the recorded session once the webcast has concluded. On the right side of your console, you'll also find some great resources available to download. With that, let's get started by introducing our speakers. Covering this topic today, we have Tonia Dudley, Strategic Security Advisor to Cofense, and David Jansen, VP of Global Sales, MSP and MSSP at Cofense. So thank you to Tonia and David for your time and expertise today as we uncover the truth behind some of the more common myths associated with email phishing attacks. And with that, I'll hand things over to you, Tonia.
Thanks. I think David's going to get us started here and kind of just give an overview of who Cofense is and our product line.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tonia. And thanks, Chrissy. Thanks, everyone, for joining. A little bit of context about Cofense for those of you who might not be familiar with us. Cofense is a company who pioneered the phishing simulation space with a product called Phishy. And in more recent years, we've been adding a variety of detection and response technologies that a number of our large enterprise customers use in their environments to help them detect and do something about the real phish that are making it as far as their users' inboxes. And because we've had those large enterprises using our platform for many years, we've built up a huge amount of data. And we've got great insight as to what the real phishing threat landscape looks like and how that changes over time. And we've been putting that information to good use. Over the last 12 months or so, we've been using that data to actually test the efficacy and accuracy of secure email gateways' abilities to stop phish. And if there's probably the biggest myth that we've worked to dispel almost daily, it's this idea that somehow IT's got it covered. With a secure email gateway deployed, the phishing problem is solved. Phishing are being stopped, and we're okay. But that's not what our testing has shown. Actually, what our testing has shown is something that we knew already from the data we were seeing from our customers. We wanted to go and just put them to the test. And what we found is that they're all broadly similar to each other in capability. And whilst these secure email gateways are relatively good at stopping malicious attachments in emails, you could argue that really that's last year or 2 or 3 years ago problem. Where they're not so good is in coping with the modern day phishing attack, and in particular credential harvesting. In fact, you can see here that on average, they're missing roughly half of all malicious URLs. And what's the one thing you need to slip past a secure email gateway and get to the inbox in order to be able to launch a credential harvesting attack? A malicious URL. And when we also know from another data point that we have that nearly 60% of all phish today are credential harvesting, combine that with the fact that secure email gateways are missing half of all malicious URLs, and one thing is certain, there are a lot of credential harvesting emails reaching the inboxes, probably of both you as an MSP, but also to your customers. And Tonia's going to walk you through an example of the kinds of credential harvesting attacks that are consistently slipping past these gateways.
Yeah, so I think for this myth number 2, phishing attacks are easy to spot. I'm constantly digging through some of our samples. What are our customers seeing? Just looking for, what do these phishing emails look like? And this is a really good one, as I actually internally got an alert from, one of our team here, like prepping for this webinar. Here's the document that they're sharing with you. And it's not hard for threat actors to either mimic this, or if they've stolen credentials already, to leverage that infrastructure to send a legit request. So this is a very simple one. your users, if you're on Office 365 or your customers are using O365, these are the alerts they're getting just as their day-to-day business. And so, as more of the these templates and these cloud-hosted services are mimicked from threat actors, it really becomes a struggle for your organizations to be able to identify what's real, what's a phish. But when we click into this, and I had our intelligence team kind of give me, as as they were building the IOCs for this particular phish, give me the sample of the landing pages, because we do capture these, and David will talk a little bit about Protect in a moment about this, but for these, it becomes more of a challenge for, not only for your organizations to understand, is this real or is it a phish? Then when you get to this landing page, that's really where you need that human eye to look at the URL to detect, is this legitimate? Is this a fake page? This particular one, they gave them the landing page. They were just really after their credentials. And then from there, then they gave them the document that they had originally said that they were sharing with them from the email that we saw. And I know we've kind of, we kind of look at these hosting services, and there's a couple things that are going on here, right? Are the threat actors, are they mimicking? Are they creating these fake pages? Because it's become very easy for them to scrape the HTML code from the email and then create that, or are they actually creating accounts on these legitimate services? But we know that these legitimate services are really cracking down, right? They're doing a good job of trying to protect these. And I know, David, in our Protect product, this is where we really shine when it comes to these, is this fake or real login page?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of aspects to this, aren't there? I mean, number one, I mean, when we say here, myth number two, phishing attacks are always easy to spot, I think we've got to think of that in two ways, right? Is it easy for technology to spot, and or is it easy for the end recipient of this email to spot? And I think the answer with a sample like this is a pretty clear no. I mean, the structure of this is really interesting because in presenting at the end, after the credentials have already been stolen, a legitimate OneDrive page, right, is a really clever way of rounding off this multi-layered phishing attack to almost make the user forget about the fact they just gave their credentials, they potentially just gave their credentials away, because what came after them giving them away was something that then looked very legitimate again. So it's almost like a legitimate sandwich where the fake login page was presented. And we think about why it is that secure email gateways are missing so many credential harvesting attacks. This is the perfect example of why. Threat actors are accepting a trade-off in the way that they construct emails. What they're doing here in having a multi-layered structure, maybe they're giving the user more chances to realize that something bad might have just happened. But they're trading that off with, more chances for a user to think, I won't fall for this. There's something that doesn't seem right. But they're trading that off with almost guaranteeing that they'll get this email past a gateway and into the intended target of user inboxes. And the reason for that is the way SEGs work. They have, relatively limited means of being able to navigate through a multi-layered attack, and they're really heavily reliant on, is this URL on a known deny list? So they're really quite good for known threats, but they really start to struggle with unknown threats and newly stood up infrastructure that stood up and collapsed sometimes, as quickly as a few minutes in order to be able to launch a credential harvesting attack like this. And so if a URL isn't on a known deny list, then a SEG has to deliver that email because there's no more context. What's really needed is the ability to actually be able to read the URL from a technology standpoint, to be able to read it, understand what that URL is saying, and then look at what's being rendered in the context of that. this looks like a Microsoft login page, and actually it's a really good rendition of one. But this isn't a Microsoft URL. So therefore, this looks like a legitimate domain that's maybe been targeted and hacked or hijacked for the purposes of standing up this page. SEGs can't do that kind of analysis, and that's why they're having to make the decision to deliver so many of these. And one other area where secure email gateways really struggle is with business email compromise attacks, where there is nothing intently malicious in terms of content in the email. I mean, there's malicious intent, but there isn't malicious content. And typically they're just plain language. But did you have any further thoughts around this particular sample, Tonia?
Yeah, so when I found this one really piqued my interest a little bit, right? BEC is one of those things that, like you said, the SEGs really don't have a way to be able to detect this. They put in keywords that they look for, and this one certainly has direct deposit in there. But there's some nuances about this, right? And it's a lot of these things that really the human eye detects, right? This one was actually reported by a user because they realized, okay, first this is coming from a Gmail account, and this Jeff person, yeah, I work with him, but this isn't really his email account, right? If he was asking for direct deposit, he should be using his internal email account for this. The way that this is formatted is, kind of interesting. So there's just some nuances about this that really it comes down to that well-conditioned human to be able to detect something looks off in this and report that. Certainly there's some security controls that are trying to put in place, but as we continue to tune those with keywords, right, then we also have that balance of are we putting real email at risk, legitimate messages from getting blocked by looking for certain keywords, right? So there's nuances about this that the threat actors will constantly tune their templates that they use to even send out these BEC messages, right, to be able to get past those. And oftentimes we see hey, do you have a moment, right, with no other context around it, which a legitimate email, has that context, so it becomes that chain reply where, they're trying to get that user to engage with them, have a conversation to be able to then lead to, hey, I need you to do something for me, or hey, can you, take this off to a text message. So BEC is one of those really dangerous ones that are really hard to detect, that it really does come down to that human identifying that phish.
Yeah, well, it certainly does, if only reliant on the capabilities of traditional secure email gateways, right? Because of the points you've just made, their abilities, are constrained to techniques like looking for particular phrases or particular patterns of words. But as you say, if just a run-of-the-mill phrase is used, then, again, very hard to say that's got malicious intent, therefore I'll stop it, because they're blocking legitimate business communication again. What's needed in order to be able to detect business email compromise with technology is, again, the ability to read the content of an email and understand it. Look at things like the visual impersonation details of an email, the entity, the email address and name, and then and the context of the headers, the information within the header analysis, and for technology to do both of those things.
Even if you look at how it's constructed, right, even though visually you can't see a return character, but certainly if you look at the HTML code behind that message, right, within that code, you can start to see, oh, there's a return character in here, right? There's some nuances that with a little bit of the technology tuning, we can start to look for those things.
Yes, and the other thing I'd just like to point out here is just draw everyone's eyes to the yellow banner at the bottom of the email, and notice that in this particular case, this email slipped past 2 layers of secure email gateway. So it got through O365 ATP and Proofpoint. And I'd just like to point, sort of make a point with a bit of a silly analogy, if people don't mind, is that the idea of layering 2 sort of traditional secure email gateways together is a bit like having a problem with a running tap and thinking, I'll put not just one colander, but 2 colanders underneath it and hope that the water will get stopped. And of course it won't. But by deploying 2 technologies with broadly the same technology constraints, that's the effect that you're going to have. So You know, if you know, you or your customers already have access to deploy Microsoft ATP Defender, you know, we saw from the data we showed earlier that it's as good, if not better, at detecting credential harvesting than technologies like Proofpoint or Cisco. And so there's an opportunity potentially there for consolidation around Microsoft. And then instead of layering in, you know, another technology that's very similar, use something like Cofense Protect MSP that Tonia mentioned earlier, which is taking a fundamentally different approach, a modern approach, to be able to detect these kinds of modern phishing attacks we've been looking at samples of. And fundamentally, the way it's different is that it's using computer vision techniques, which is part of artificial intelligence, to be able to emulate how we as humans can look at, interact with, read and understand emails. And so, you know, it can follow a multi-layered phishing attack. Sometimes threat actors will put a captcha in between the initial email and then, you know, perhaps another read divert to a login page. And how does a traditional secure email gateway identify the photographs with the traffic lights in them or the ones with the train on them? But Protect can, because it can, as I say, emulate what we can do and can really then navigate through, get past things like capture challenges, get to the end URL, still have the same capability to say, is this on a known deny list? But if not, go further. Be the detective. Open up the email in a safe environment. Look at the resultant login page like you or I would. Compare it with an index image of the real brand's login pages that it's constantly searching and looking for, and see if there's anything out of place. Even if we get a perfect facsimile of what a login page looks like from that prior sample we looked at, it's then got the ability to do what I said was important earlier. It can read the URL and it can see that the two things don't marry up. And so it's got far more data points to be able to say with certainty, this has ill intent. And moving on to myth number 3, Tonia.
Yeah, so we came across this survey, and so it was, you know, kind of some interesting points here. Are less tech-savvy users fall for phish? When I initially read this myth, I was like, does that mean the IT people fall for it over the business users? But it really is more about that generational aspect of, you know, Gen X, Z, and millennials. They're, you know, referred to many times as the digital natives, right? They've only had they've had technology in their life, you know, since they were born, right? They, you know, they're constantly, they're using it, right? And so they're less in tune to, you know, stopping and questioning and looking at things. And so what we see is that the boomer generation is more likely to detect and not interact with a message, right? And then do the thing with it that should be done with it, right? Forwarding it to IT. And so it's just interesting when we look at these different aspects of when it comes to the generations and how people interact with technology. I know when I was doing my program at my last company, I had started a new hire program, you know, doing new hires, you know, within 30 days of them hiring. And all of a sudden, you know, I had been trending around 30% as that new hire, right? Because it's their first time seeing a phish. They're more likely to interact with it. It became the fall, August, September timeframe, and all of a sudden my interaction rate, the susceptibility rate went to 50%. And so as I started digging in, I realized that, oh, we just hired our, you know, new university graduates, our interns, you know, that, you know, even though they had been just interning or, you know, they're not accustomed to the enterprise work environment. You know, they may be working from their university and personal email through their Gmail, and Gmail does a really good job of, you know, blocking and scraping a lot of you know, a lot of those dangerous, malicious emails out, so they get comfortable in that environment, right? And not realizing that the Microsoft enterprise environment is, you know, is a little bit different than when it comes to how, you know, how they need to, you know, take a pause when looking at their email.
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw this data, but the more I thought about it, the more it did sort of start to make sense. And I guess, you know, coming in as into a first job and having, you know, previously existed with your own, with your own laptop, your own tablet. Then coming into an enterprise environment, and all of a sudden there are roadblocks, there's controls, there's checks, there's procedures in place, and all of a sudden I can't download the apps that I want. I can't get out to my Dropbox account from my corporate machine. And so do I fall into this mindset of thinking, wow, this customer's got me locked down, they've got me safe? And I think, in many ways, that thought process is the correct one, right? I mean, a corporate environment is, of course, going to be, by definition, more secure. But, does the mistake then, come around to that thinking extending to, therefore, my email must be secure as well?
Right.
And then,
and when we look at what businesses are dealing with, right, we have the email, is typically managed by, the enterprise or the MSP, right, that, they're trying to balance that. I got to make sure that legitimate email is getting through. And how do you, what's that right level of tuning on that, on those controls, right, to make sure that we're not blocking legitimate, invoices and purchase orders from getting through, right, for, for a team to be able to do their process. Right.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the mail and messaging teams, the IT teams, don't have the same luxury of, as Google do with personal email accounts, where they can, take the liberty of over blocking. And if that means, that some of my subscription service emails, don't get through to me, well, it's maybe an irritation, but it's not as threatening as me not being able to access my business presentation and being late for a meeting, or, being in sales and that purchase order not coming through on the last day of a quarter, right? So it is that balancing act. And, over time, is the temptation, therefore, to, make the permissions more permissible, and of course, in doing so, let more of the pernicious through. It's a real balancing act. What have we got on this one?
So this one was an interesting phish that I had found, where we talked about the digital natives, right? They're more curious. They're more apt to interact with this. What we see when it comes to our secure email gateways and our controls, right? They are blocking a large majority of attachments, but when they do get through, there are these odd file types that draws that curiosity for somebody to actually interact with it and click on it. Another interesting aspect about this is, that digital native might not also be familiar with different business process and aspects around how the organization functions, right? And this one actually kind of made me laugh a little bit, because it's coming from the HR department with shipping documents. I've never come across an HR department that would be dealing with shipping documents, even working in a manufacturing organization. So there's some nuances about this that, somebody working in their day-to-day job is going to realize this doesn't seem right, and then report that as this particular user did. But there's just some oddities about this, right, that that's not always going to get blocked by those security controls.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sort of starts off, with some degree of plausibility, doesn't it? Because the attachment, looks a little bit kind of, well, it could be an org chart and it's coming from HR. But then, that importance of looking at the full context, and things go pretty awry from that point onwards. To your point, this is definitely something that, I'd be hitting my reporter button on.
Right.
So let's talk about myth number 4, Tonia. So what are these data points we've got here?
Yeah, so a lot of these come from Verizon data breach report, right? Every year they come out with these, and they've had a focus on this small business, right? Our attackers don't target small businesses, and then, as you can see from many of the stats on this page, that's not the case. In talking to a number of CISOs between Aaron Higbee, our CTO and co-founder, and I have talked to a few different customers, and we actually were talking with one CISO because he was really struggling with how does he deal with, he's a large energy company, but his problem is that he sees his supply chain getting attacked to make their way into his organization, right? So small business, they don't have the resources, the capabilities to implement, some of the same controls that we do for larger organizations that maybe you use an MSSP for. And so he's dealing with how do I get my supply chain secure, because that's how attackers are trying to get to me and to, get my teams to send money, to make their way into my network, right? They're spoofing their supplier. They're researching their suppliers to know who are these larger organizations using. So it's really important for small businesses to really find ways that they can invest in that. And actually, one of the recommendations from this particular article was use an MSP, right? Use MSSPs, because that's how you're going to be able to really invest in those controls and really give you that security posture that's going to help you do that business with those larger organizations, right? As with the last year of vulnerabilities that have been hitting, Kaseya, the supply chain, there's been a lot of focus from the larger enterprises to then start asking questions of the small business, smaller businesses that are their suppliers, right? So there's a lot of angst right now in this environment because of the vulnerabilities that came out last year, the targets after those small businesses, and then not even to mention ransomware, right? When what we see with ransomware is they're not delivering that ransom attack in one phishing email. There are several emails that are delivered up until that point. They're delivering, they're stealing credentials, they're delivering remote access Trojans to be able to make their way in, and then some tools to exfiltrate data. So because now once they have data, then they can, it becomes their leverage point to require that ransom payment. So there's a series of events that happen with a ransom attack as well. So I know you have some thoughts here, David, on small businesses.
Well, yeah, some of our data points actually that kind of support these third-party data points. So when we look at if the slide will just scroll, there we go. If we look at what's happening in MSP and MSP customers' email environments that are protected by Cofense Protect today, we can see that those data points do they do play out. Unfortunately, we've blocked attacks in cases where I think 70 to 80% of all our MSP partners who use Protect to protect their own email environment, we've detected and blocked attacks for them. And then if we look at on average, what's happening in those MSP customers' email environments in terms of what Protect's finding and stopping, and it's stopping daily attacks in around half of all those end customer environments. And I guess there's no cause to be surprised about that, given the sort of sequence of data that we've looked at, right? The real challenge and problem of SEGs not being able to stop attacks, in particular credential harvesting. We talked about some of the reasons why that's the case, and then we talked about how Protect goes those important steps further, and that therefore it's not surprising that it's going to be finding stuff that was on its way to the inbox, and we managed to get those quarantined. And again, just to sort of reiterate the difference here, it's this human emulation, if you like, this ability to really look at, read, interact with, and understand email like we all can, but through technology to provide that automated a way to stop a lot more of the malicious activity. I think we had one more sample, didn't we? Yes, we did.
Yeah.
So what's this one, Tonia?
So this one was an interesting one, and this really kind of goes back to that supply chain. And when I was looking at this particular message, and we see this quite a bit where threat actors are taking an existing email thread, because they have these credentials, they have access to the inbox, they have access to the sent items. pulling out an email that has already, many thread of back and forth conversation, and then coming in and spoofing one of the people interacting with this message. And then if you look at their message, I know it's kind of hard to see on this one, but their message that they have in here and the link that they have has nothing to do with the conversation that has taken place around this COVID disinfection cleaning, right? Like, so there was this whole series of events, and, and the Simon person was part of this conversation, who was a supplier to, probably a small business like we talked about. And so what we see is they're leveraging these existing conversations. So it makes it look like, oh, I'm supposed to interact with this, right? It's just another way to get that recipient to interact with that message, clicking on that link, downloading the malicious file, then that can then get them a foothold into the environment.
Yeah, it's fascinating, this one, isn't it? Because it looks like from a reconnaissance standpoint, there's been quite a period, up to the point where they've been able to, compromise credentials and get visibility into this inbox and be able to find this conversation. Yeah. Curious then that there's no real effort made to keep the thread of it running, right? And so I think there's this likelihood that people will sort of leap to the conclusion that if an attack like this is seen, it's a highly targeted, highly researched attack on my organization. Whereas in fact, this is just mass delivered stuff, probably, well, we don't know for sure, but probably completely automated, delivered via via a bot. And so again, these kind of attacks are launched en masse, to organizations of all shapes and sizes. And it's not necessarily, the attempt at espionage, the attempt to steal the design for the fighter jet. This is
right.
This is pretty pervasive stuff.
We do see these, right? We do see these attacks are more broad, right? Because we manage several customers, we can take an attack we see in one customer and then, send those IOCs across all of our customers, and then even mitigate some of those phishing attacks just by detect those, just because the IOCs that we have from that one email, and see that those are more broad attacks, that they're not really targeted. So it's very interesting, right? When you look at different perspectives of how phishing attacks are launched.
And another example, just drawing people's eyes to the yellow banner again, of an email that's got past a double header of traditional secure email gateway. I mean, these emails are not without their challenges, right, in order to be able to detect them. But again, what's needed here is, and Protect can do this, it's the ability to be able to look at and identify the fact that the reply to address is different to what would be expected. And to actually be able to detect and stop this on the way in, as opposed to being able to worried about, the click on the link, or potentially, the continued reply to email going back out.
Yeah.
I think that brings us to the end of our planned content, which gives a good opportunity to, if Chrissy's still on, to be able to hand back to Chrissy just to talk a little bit about what's coming next. I've gone too far. I've got a slide missing. But Chrissy, are you there?
I'm here, and I think, let's put this slide up so that everybody can kind of consume what's on here while we get through some Q&A. So of course, for everybody that's on open Q&A, feel free to use the Q&A box that you see in your console to ask questions. There have been a few that have come through, so we can go through those to get started. So the first one here, can you expand on the threats that SEGs are missing and why?
Yeah, I guess in some ways I've covered quite a bit of this already. But what I can do is just provide a few more data points, which are quite interesting. So we ourselves actually run a managed phishing defense service for some of our enterprise clients, and so we're effectively, what's happening is millions of employees of those customers, every time they see an email they think suspicious in their inbox, they're pressing the Cofense reporter button to send that email to an abuse box. And then it's our technology combined with our SOC analysts who are then analyzing those emails. And from that, we can get huge insight into just the degree to which malicious emails, get to the inbox. I think over the last two full years, around about 1 in 8 of all the emails reported by users have been then subsequently identified by our analysts as malicious. So it gives you an idea, I guess, as to the scale of the issue. I think we talked about some of the technology challenges as to why that's the case. There are also other considerations, like, can a secure email gateway really take, even if it had the capability, the time and effort it takes to perform a deeper level analysis before delivering the email? It's always that balance of, I don't want to delay legitimate email business delivery. I certainly legitimate email delivery through a false positive. And so it's this constant challenge of how much can I tighten my configuration and to get things stopped.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question. How has the phishing threats changed specifically with MSPs and other managed security providers?
Well, I don't know whether I can talk specifically just to how it's changed for MSPs, because I think what we've shown really is that in many cases, similar threats are seen across a whole variety of organizations. What I can say is that there have been some fundamental shifts in the phishing landscape. Going back to 2.5 years ago, I wouldn't have been showing statistics that said credential harvesting was nearly 60% of all phish. I'd have been presenting data that said ransomware phishing emails were 60% of all phish. And of course, as with a lot of things, the landscape does change. But it's important to have a finger on the pulse as to what threat actors are doing and what the largest, most prevailing trends are. Because when we think about training and enabling our users to be that last line of defense, when all technology, has not detected that, some emails, is we want to take the time to train those users on what they're most likely to see in that time and place. If you're running a phishing simulation program, you wouldn't want to be devoting 60% of the campaigns to ransomware-based attacks in an environment today where we probably should be running 60% of the scenarios based on these kind of more complex credential harvesting attacks that we're seeing more and more.
Okay, thank you. Next one here. Can you speak about compliance in relationship to Cofense, specifically CMMC and HIPAA?
So I was actually just typing out a response to that, because Cofense provides email security defense, phishing defense products. And those two are really compliance organizations. I'm not really sure what specifically you're looking for there on that one.
Okay, moving on. Next question up here. You've mentioned email. I was just going to say,
if Dan can provide a little more context to his question, we'll be happy to take another stab at that. If you're able to perhaps pose a second layer to that, Dan, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. In the meantime, you've mentioned email protection, but what do you have for phishing training and awareness for our customers?
Right at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that we as a company pioneered the concept of phishing simulation and brought the industry's first phishing simulation platform to market. And we're still very proud to be leaders in phishing simulation, and one of the things that allows us to be so useful to our customers and partners is that we really focus the templates in our platform based on the real phish that we see out in the real world. And so we're really laser focused on helping our customers and partners train on the things that matter. What we've done for MSPs in Protect is we've created a three-dimensional capability. So we've got the core capability of enhanced email security that I've been talking about, but within the same product, we've added another couple of capabilities. One is to provide a fully automated, truly set it and forget it phishing simulation program with a playbook of templates that are all based on real threats. The results reports are generated automatically as well and can be just sent on a monthly basis to the recipient that you nominate in each of your end customers. And so if any of you are currently running phishing simulation programs for your clients, and if there's overhead there you could do without and would prefer it to just be automated, there's an option there. And we're in the process of adding security awareness training, LMS content into Protect as well. Maybe that's something along the lines of what you're asking about, Dan, but we'll be looking to provide HIPAA-related content as part of that SaaS offering in the Protect platform.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Another question here. Are there 3 top things that I can share with my customers to help them better identify possible phishing emails?
Tonia, do you want to have a crack at one or two of those, and I'll have a think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely we see credfish as the top threat, right? So the first thing that they should be doing is looking to enable MFA, right? Even Microsoft says, if you can enable MFA, you're more likely to reduce those phishing threats. Although we still see them get through, we still see them target them. That doesn't mean that they're not susceptible to being targeted with them. It's just making sure that they are aware of when your organization has MFA enabled, when should you be entering your credentials, right? Getting them more comfortable with that. BEC is another one we still see. Those probably are the 2. Less and less of attachments being delivered via there, but definitely credential, cloud hosted services, those sorts of things. I'm sure there's something you probably have to add, David.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of just tips really of what tends to have the greatest impact in helping users not fall victim, helping them identify phish is the number one for us at Cofense is never run phishing simulations as a surprise.
Right.
If it's not about tricking or failing. It's not about surprising a user. What it is about is embracing the user as a key part of the overall defense, and basically saying, look, this is a very human problem, right? Phish are created by humans. They're targeting humans. So the very idea that you could solve the problem entirely by technology alone is flawed. And so, we've seen the data. Phish are reaching the inbox. We need visibility of that, ideally, in order to be able to do something about it. The only way we're going to get visibility is if users feel like they want to help defend and report those emails. And so, announcing a phishing simulation program, say, hey, we're going to commence a program, and the reason we're doing it is we need your help, right? And we're going to run phishing simulations to help you spot what you're looking for. And we're going to make it super easy for you to report, because we're going to give you a button. So you just don't have to remember a complicated process. You can just let us know every time you see something. And you know what? If you can go that one stage further and give them feedback after they've reported something as well, so they know that somebody was looking at it on the other end, and they get that data point back, oh, was I right or not? Then, our data shows, doesn't it, Tonia, that
yeah, and I was actually going to just add on to that. I immediately went to the real phish, right? And you went to the training one, which is very important. And we see that with our when you condition your users to report that email, they report it quickly, and that we've seen that in our data. We also have seen that in our phishing defense center, when we are managing their phishing defense solution, or managed PDR, that they're getting that feedback, and that they are 2 points higher in the resiliency rate. So, having that constant feedback loop is also another conditioning element of letting them know, hey, that's just spam, or hey, thanks for reporting, that really helps us. So we really do see an increase in that.
Yeah, I see Dan has been able to send a further clarification to the question. Thank you for that. Yeah, so absolutely, we recognise the importance of that. So we make sure that we have instances and infrastructure that are dedicated to North America. We also have SOC analysts that are on American shores, and so if you would like further detail on our compliance policies and our procedural policies, Dan, obviously happy to share those over email, not a phish, but over email after this event. Perhaps if you can send me an email at david.janson@cofence.com, and I can personally see to getting a more detailed answer for you. That's JANSON, by the way. I think we're bang on time. I
think we're just about wrap up. I don't know if you wanted to talk to anything on this slide here before we send everyone off, and then give kind of a last chance for Q&A. So if anybody's got any questions, feel free to ask them now.
Yeah, what's on the slide here is just something that we've packaged up as part of our MSP program, and it basically has been designed to allow you to be able to launch a promotional offer with your clients. So to be able to call them and say, we'd like to offer you a trial of enhanced email security for free. What it allows you to do is basically get access to a full production environment for Protect MSP, be able to deploy to your customers' environments in that first 30-day window. And then every customer you deploy after that 30 days will then have their emails protected for another 90 days. So it just gives a nice period of time for the value of Protect to be proven to your customers, that it's keeping them more secure, and hopefully an easier way for you to onboard new revenue streams or potentially new customers. So thanks for reminding me to do that, Chrissy.
No problem. Thank you. And I think that's it for today. I don't see any other questions coming in. So we'll just touch on quickly what's next for us. You can join us at Right of Boom. We'll be there February 9th to 11th in Tampa, Florida. So if you're there, definitely come say hello to us. And otherwise, thank you again, David and Tonia, so much for today, for your expertise today, covering all of this stuff. Always much appreciated. And thank you again for everybody who joined us today. I hope you got good value from these great insights, and we'll see you on the next webcast.
And just before you hit the big red button, Chrissy, Dan's asked another question. Is there a rough date for the security awareness training addition to Protect? There is. It's about 4 weeks out, so it's almost ready to be GA'd. Thanks for that question. Okay, great. All right, thank you everybody, and we'll see you next time. And have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.